my coworkers are throwing gummies at people. Because, you know, my talk comes with candy. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes. For those of you that look confused at the slide up here, due to unforeseen circumstances out of my control, am not able to give the social media persona training. But don't worry, this is still going to be the best talk you see today. It still comes with memes and intel and candy, so you're already like 3 for 3 over everything else. All right. We're going to give it like one more minute, and then we'll get started. I can see you leaving. Yeah, you, in the baseball cap. Yeah, I can see you. Don't worry, we'll come get you later. If the police ask you, it was not a threat. All right, we're all in agreement. I see shaking of heads. Good. Not threat. Good. Hush you. I feel threatened, but I like it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Those sentiments are well received. All right. It's all the sugar. The sugar is what's making people violent today. T-shirts should be made for that. It should feature. I really like that one. All right, our doors are shut, so we're going to get started. This talk is called the Hybrid Analyst. I know some people were expecting a social media talk. I'm not allowed to give the talk, so instead we're going to talk about intel analysis and threat intel, which I feel like is a very important part of cybersecurity, but also an underutilized and misunderstood part of cybersecurity. So where threat intel is currently is not where it needs to be. And where I work, we currently have intel as the center of our cybersecurity. Like, I meet with all the different teams, we work directly with all the different teams, and instead of complaining about there being a problem in intel, I'm going to show you how to fix that problem at your company. You're going to be able to translate this across any industry, across any company, any enterprise, government, non-government, whatever you need. All right. So let's get started. My name's Rachel. My last name is pronounced GIACOBOZZI. I know every single person was wondering that. I am a cyber threat intel analyst at Target, like 12 other presenters that you've seen in the last 2 days. I also work at Target. I have 14 years of intel experience. I came from military intelligence to government contracting intelligence, social media intelligence. Now I do cyber threat intelligence. I've done pretty much every version of intel that you can think of. For the last 5 years, I've been a cyber threat intel analyst. For 3 of those years, I was a strategic analyst. For the last 2.5-ish years, almost 3 years now, I've been a technical intel analyst, and we're going to get into the difference between strategic and technical intel and why that difference needs to happen. By the way, my Twitter handle is Soul Crusher. 86 is not my birthday, that's my level. I'm currently a level 86 Soul Crusher. And if anyone wants to challenge that, you by all means. I always like a good challenge. All right, so our agenda today, when I was thinking about how to structure intel training for the next generation of intel 2.0, if you will. Sorry, my phone is blowing up on the podium. I thought about what we do at our company. So we track phishing. How many people here think that they track phishing really well at their company? Okay, everyone I work with needs to put their hands down. Okay, I see one person back there. I feel like phishing is a great way for intel to become active in day-to-day cybersecurity operations. phishing is a major attack vector at every single company, and a lot of times threat intel is regulated to like reading briefs or creating executive summaries or searching out the new bad guy. And really what you need is someone that's going to be there to help your IR team get faster and better and close those cases more. Help your detection team determine what detection you need. And we do that through our phishing. And this is actually a lot more of my personal experience of how I became what the new hybrid analyst is. I did that because I've been monitoring phishing for 3 years. And if anyone thinks that it's impossible to monitor phishing, I'm going to show you our manual process. It's been just me for 3 years at a company that is one of the, Fortune 500 companies. Like, if you think about it, I'm here saying that I can do it at a large company by myself successfully. So any size company that you have, you can scale this. You just need to invest in the person. You need to invest the time. And this is how you can do it. All right, so let's talk about threat intelligence. There are 2 versions of threat intelligence. There's the more traditional version of threat intelligence, your strategic intelligence. This is high-level intel. This is more story, report, or brief focused. This is what the majority of vendors provide when you get those like 50-page briefings that they come out like 4 years after the fact, but it has a pretty name on it. These are made for executives and contextualized stories or blogs for mass consumption. They make it as generic as possible to allow the majority of the people to be able to consume it in whatever manner they need, but they don't provide you actionable intel. They provide you atomic indicators. And these things are not stuff that you can really go off of when you're writing detection or you need IR. IR needs something that's going on currently. Like, you need to be able to provide behavioral indicators. And phishing allows us to look at indicators in a different manner. So at Target, we started doing something called the technical intelligence. I'm on our technical intelligence team. It's me and 2 other people. These are operational. It's indicator or tactic focused. So when I say tactic, I've been to like 3 other briefs that have talked about stepping away from the IOCs and going more into behavior, and that's what we do. It relies on collaboration between Intel, IR, and detection, and my IR and detection team are all sitting up here with engineering, and they can all tell you that, like, we do talk on a daily basis. Red team's up here, like, all of our teams are in this room, and when I say, like, oh, you need to talk on a daily basis, I mean, like, I know a lot about them, they know a lot about me. That's on a personal level as well as a professional level, and if you're not willing to build those relationships and talk to people on a daily basis, you're not going to get very far in inserting yourself into the team. All right, so why track phishing? To the majority of companies, phishing is just a daily activity. It's not, you get the indicators in, probably between 10 and 100 alerts a day for phishing, depending on how bad your phishing problem is. But it's the #1 attack vector. 90% of all cyber attacks, successful cyber attacks, started with a phish. Out of that, 40% of them were spear phishing. And they were also looking for credential phishing. Now, credential phishing is considered like a social engineering tactic. It's almost always glossed over or pushed aside by a lot of intel and by a lot of incident response teams. But that's where you need to focus, and that's where we've been focusing is commodity malware. Commodity malware and social engineering phishing. And we've been tracking it on a collective basis. Don't just track it one-off and done. We collect it and track it and report it, and we have 2.5 years of searchable, reportable intelligence on every phish that has been able to be analyzed against our company for 2.5 years. I can tell you when Hansentor started coming against us. I can tell you which group TA530 actually what malware TA530 actually runs, not just what Proofpoint says it runs. I can tell you how many times credential phishing hits us on a daily basis, and this is something that you really need to have at your company to understand your threat landscape, because unless you work for the military industrial sector, your threat landscape is 90% phishing. All right, so we're going to go over our sources of information. Where do you get the information about the phish? Now, 90% of the time, you're going to get it internally. You either have alerts or some form of incident response case or a pass from another team. Sometimes vendors will pass over like, hey, I think someone's account's been compromised. Can you look into this a little bit? That's a very common thing that's happening now, especially with O365. There's third parties There are vendors that provide phishing, and the vendors are good, but you're going to get to a point where vendors can't help you because they're not industry specific. And you have listservs, and those are industry specific. I suggest that you have an Intel team, you get them on industry specific listservs. They're out there. I work for retail. I'm on a retail listserv. I'm on a financial listserv. I'm on the hospitality listserv. I'm on a listserv that runs FBI and CFTA. I'm on one that's like kind of on the down low of just people that want to make Intel better. And I get intelligence from them, and I give it back. We're going to go over a whole slide on why it's important that if you are producing intelligence internally, you need to share it externally. Having good threat intelligence is not a competitive advantage. You are not making your industry better by keeping your intel to yourself. There are ways to get around. There are ways to get around the need for legal. Like, we sanitize our reports. We track way more than we externally put out there, but we still put it out there. It's important to me that if we as a retailer are getting something, that the other retailers also block it, because once it's blocked in our industry, those attackers will move on. They are out for the easiest targets. Now, you do have some every once in a while that are desperately needing to hit your company. This will also catch them, but it will allow you to move aside the ones that are just out for the easiest target to make way for the ones that you need to spend time on. Now, there are blogs. I'm going to show you my two favorite blogs. One is My Online Security. The websites are up here. It's a UK-based blog. The problem with it is that's a little wordy. It's like actual blog style format. It's very story-driven, but once you get used to the formatting, you will find amazing intel about phishing in there. He always has all the good trick bot campaigns and the hand store campaigns. Now, there is a more technical style blog, Malware Traffic Analysis. He's also on Twitter. I know a lot of people that follow GrrCon also follow the guy that runs this blog. It's more just like straight up IOCs, but it'll give you what you need to search for phishing. All right, so because I need to look for the sources of phishing, I decided that as an intel analyst, I'm already doing all my research, right? So I find all this third-party phishing intel, and a lot of times there aren't cases created on it with my CSIRT coworkers, but it did get delivered to an end user. So that email needs to be processed. And a lot of times that requires me to type it up, even like all my research up, and hand it off to CSIRT. And I started thinking, wouldn't it be great if I could create the case and work the case myself? Wouldn't it be amazing if I could do all that work and take it away from CSIRT having to do double work, because I already researched everything. I know where all of the emails landed in our system. I know exactly what needs to happen. So I spent a month with CSIRT. I sat down with him, and I became certified as a SOC analyst. So in our company, not only do I do threat intel, I am certified as a SOC analyst. That's our senior director. Oh, fail. Okay. Get out of here, Chris, so I can finish my talk. All right, so now I spent the month with CSIRT. That's about how long our training program is for entry-level SOC analysts. That's the people that would take most of the phishing cases, anything that doesn't require additional malware analysis or anything additional beyond like, hey, we got this email, let's pull this email, let's make sure there's no call-outs to any of the links or nothing got downloaded, let's close this case, contain it, and move on. So what can I do now? Well, I can create that case. I can conduct all the research. I already have to do that research. I do all the scoping, the case containment. I create a phishing report because we do report as much as paperwork sucks. It's extremely important to have your paperwork together. And I'm going to show you the template we use and exactly why we use the template and what each section is. And it's really great, and we share it, so it will be available, and you guys can use it, and it's super easy. All right, so this saves my CSIRT work and energy. And what is your job at a cybersecurity office other than making sure that IR and incidents get handled quicker and faster? So this takes away their need to have constantly redoing and duplicating all the efforts that I'm already doing when I do my normal everyday job. It also allows for better integration. So I sat with them for a month. They showed me what literally every system does. I now know the ins and outs of my entire email chain, all of the ability, like what we have the ability to see, all the logs that we can see, what we can't see, how to pull all the emails. Like, it was a great experience. And now I'm closer to them, and that fosters the communication needed to really create the fusion, my favorite buzzword, to move cybersecurity from a alert basis to an actual predictive intelligence, or a basis where like you can focus on your threat hunting, you can focus on predictive analysis, you can focus on automation instead of constantly focusing on the alerting every day. All right, so we're going to scope a phish. Who thinks they know how to scope a phish? All the people I saw it. So your main analyses for a phish. Literally every company has some way of figuring out finding an email using either a sender, a subject line, an attachment name or MD5 hash, or an embedded link. If you do not have the ability to find these logs, you need to talk to your company, because you have to be able to find an email somewhere in your system. That's how you stop phishing. And tips like proper scoping requires access. If you do not have access as an Intel person, mirror your access with your IR people. You need to be able to find out what systems are stopping emails and why. It's very important that I know which security appliance stopped my phishing email. And when that appliance stops blocking the email or stops alerting me, I need to know why. And then I can go back and be like, hey, why isn't this appliance working? It worked yesterday, but it didn't work today. And this email didn't change, and the malware didn't change, so let's make sure everything's working properly. And that's something that can take days or weeks to notice. And to be able to say, like, within a couple hours, like, hey, I noticed that something's not right here. Let's make sure that we have detection. Let's get on blocking it. That's important. That saves your company. Potentially saves your company from the initial intrusion vector. Start broad and move narrow. A lot of people hate that. They're like, oh, I have this exact sender and this exact subject line. I'm going to show you what I mean on this next slide. All right, so we have our example email. This is an actual Hansatory email that came in August. Didn't come to my company. I got it online because, you know, you don't want legal to get all mad at you for sharing actual phishing emails. Because we all know, according to each company, they never have incidents. So when I look at this, I have a sender, I have a subject line, I have an attachment, right? I'm just going to search on that. Well, with Hansatory, they actually use subject line patterns. They use sender patterns. So when you go to search your sender, you can't just search for Andrew C. Brown at, you know, the entire sender domain. You need to search the sender domain by itself. You need to search partials of the sender domain, and you need to search the sender name. These are all going to produce different results. And yes, you may get a few false positives in there, but the more you do it, the easier it's going to be to just like section out those false positives, find the few that you have, and then move on. Same with your subject line. So I know for a fact with this subject line and with this campaign, it was IRS themed. There were 72 different subject lines. If I searched that one subject line, I would have only found 20 emails. When I searched a generic version of the subject line, I found 1,762 emails. There's a big difference between 1,700 and 20. And if you don't teach your SOC analysts, if you don't teach your intel team to search properly, to understand that the current attackers are using patterns and not direct phishing to every single person, you're going to miss a huge portion of the attack field. Same thing with your attachment. Some people don't have the ability to search attachments, but you have the ability to search attachment types. This is where you get Boolean searches or advanced searches, where you can be like, I need someone that sent us a subject line with IRS and also had a zip attachment. There are plenty of out-the-box appliances that allow you to do this multi-searching and this advanced searching functions. All right, so we're going to find patterns. That's what Intel does. Intel finds patterns. And we're going to talk about the bane of everybody's existence right now, Emotet. Okay, does anyone here not know what Emotet is? So I can explain it. All right, I see a few. Okay. So Emotet is a current banking Trojan that's been making its round in phishing. And the reason why Emotet is the current bane of everyone's existence is because out of all commodity malware, they have the best initial reconnaissance phase when it comes to phishing. They use different senders and different subject lines and different links inside the email for every single phish. We're talking about thousands to tens of thousands of phish per campaign. Nothing is similar. So you start deciding, how do you figure this out? There are patterns if you recognize it over the years. Like, I think our current Emotet, which was last week, had 176 subject line patterns. And one of them was literally like, has the word invoice in it, which I'm sure you can realize that for a retailer, that takes quite a bit of time to scope on to make sure I'm only finding phishes and not legitimate emails. But that's something that needs to happen. And when I do that and I spend the 2.5 hours scoping on 172 subject lines and then hand over CSIRT the 4 that I didn't see in their cases, well, that's why they love me. Because they didn't have to spend 3 hours of their containment time looking for more emails. This is very important. That saves them time that they were able to look at other alerts, to process other things, and potentially save our company and our networks from another threat. Okay, so here's my subject line pattern, and this leads into how I spent time with our detection team. So this is a third of the links used in an Emotech campaign 2 weeks ago. They look all different. But if you break it down and you start looking more into them, you start looking into URIs, you can actually find a few patterns. So out of, I think there was like 1,000 actual links in the emails, I found 8 subject line patterns that produced only Emotet results in our environments. So I was like, hey, they only produce Emotet results in our environment when we search on URI patterns. This is something we need to start alerting on. I'm not alerting on a domain. I'm not blocking the initial domain in the link. That doesn't help you anyways, because that's going to change in an hour. You need to start looking at subject line patterns that are going to alert you to newly delivered emails and start looking at 2, 3, 4 steps down the line of malware. All right. So I found my pattern. Now I'm working with detection. Our detection team's amazing. They have the ability to write behavioral detection. And one of the easiest behavioral detections to write is regex. Now, I'm going to show you the regex that I created, and our detection team's going to laugh at me. So this is my regex. It does work technically. It's also not the greatest regex. It's going to, well, first of all, I didn't know what half of the little symbols meant because I had only been doing regex for like a couple months, but I wanted to learn how to write detection, so I knew what patterns to find. If I don't know what detection is in our environment, I don't know what systems we have the ability to write detection on, then how am I going to know what to hand my team? I could be like, oh yeah, Proofpoint came down with this amazing regex, or so-and-so on Twitter passed over this new rule. Do you know if that's going to work in your environment? Are you just blindly handing things to your detection team and hoping and praying that it gets taken care of in your environment? Because that's definitely not the way to go. That's going to cause frustration, and it's going to cause animosity between the teams because you're handing them stuff they can't use, and they're not getting anything useful from you. And then when they don't implement it, and it happens like 2 or 3 days later, and you ask, hey, I handed you that. Why did you not put detection in? You know, that's defensive. And it's going to come off that way, and you're going to just keep breaking down that relationship instead of working together, figuring out what you can do in your environment. So I went to our detection team, and I said, hey, guys, look, I made this really cute regex. What can you do for me? This is what they sent me back. Which is why our detection team does detection and I don't. Because while I was able to find the pattern and I was able to show that you can write a regex on it, they're a detection team for a reason. But having that initial handshake, them knowing that I took the time to search in our environment, I made sure I wasn't handing them things that were going to create 900,000 false positives, which one of them did. They appreciate it, and it makes the detection easier. It cuts off their time to write that rule by like, I don't know, probably like half, because the majority of rule writing is research. And if I do that research ahead of time, which I'm going to have to do anyways because I'm already looking for all this information, why would I hand them a half-finished piece of work? All right, so we're going to talk about our types of phishing. You got phishing. You figured out your emails. You have 1,000 of them. How do you figure out what type of email you have? Can anyone tell me based on a subject line what a phish is? Does anyone think that they could do that? Or based on just like one little pattern of a call out? Now, I can do that because I have 2.5 years of experience, and we like to do that to the new people because it looks like magic and they think it's funny. But really, it comes from years of searching. And where do you find it? If you're looking at Malware Virus Total, they are your friends. You can search for a top-level domain. You can search for your hashes. You can see what the common AV detection is. And when you detect on it, like, does it really matter if it came from Russia or the eastern part of Europe or Asia, if what they're handing you is an info stealer, you're not getting targeted by a nation state. You're getting targeted by some guy that just wants money from you. What's important is that you know what type of malware it is and what that malware does. And I'm going to show you how you can structure that so that way when you hand it back to detection, or you can hand it to a red team or a pen testing team or a malware analyst, it helps them create a better environment for your company. Hybrid analysis is a great thing. Who's familiar with hybrid analysis? I should see a lot of hands. This is a sandboxing tool. It's amazing. It's free. Almost all of the VirusTotal links that have malware in them also have a hybrid analysis link in the comment section. It provides you everything that a normal sandboxing would, all your indicators, behavioral indicators, which is really important because when you start writing behavioral detection, you need to know why it's malicious. What parent process spawned a child process that has been known to be used maliciously? These are things that you have to think about when you start doing detection in your environment. Any.run. It's a visualized sandbox. So if you don't like just sandboxes that provide you a report, here's one that will walk you through, open the document, and show you exactly what happens at every single step. It's amazing. There is a free version. If you don't want them to then put your information back out on the internet, you have to pay for it. But the free version allows you to look up things that have already been uploaded. And a lot of people upload this stuff for fun. And then you can find it and you can use it for your analysis. Social engineering. This is a bane of people's existence. How can you tell it's a social engineering email? It just goes to a generic website. Maybe it's asking for credentials. It's important you understand what type of credentials they're looking for. There's a big difference if my company has something that's looking for Capital One credentials versus O365 credentials or OWA credentials or Dropbox credentials. How likely is it for them to be a reuse of what your company is using? That's what you need to think about when you look at credential phishing, not just, it's credential phishing, let's just push it aside. Like, what impact is that going to have to your company? Because a lot of breaches started with somebody putting in their information in like a fake OWA web form. And then someone went to the real OWA site, the web application, and logged in and got their emails and then phished someone else and got the credentials they needed and got into the systems that they needed. This is how breaches happen. This is how attacks happen. And if you're not able to help at this beginning end, or if you think automation helps with this, you're very sorely mistaken, because automation is notoriously failing in social engineering. It requires your user, your end user, your employees, whoever you are that you're protecting, to interact with the malware, interact with the link in some way. Automation can't detect that. So how do you figure it out? URL query. URLquery.net and scan.io. URLscan.io. These are great places that will show you the screen capture of the page. They give you a ton of information, an overview. It'll tell you if it's on a blacklist. It'll tell you if it's on a blacklist. It'll show you every single redirect along the way, whether or not there was a GET or a post for that redirect, where your credentials go. It'll show you a screen capture of the page to show you what type of visualization they're using, what type of pictures they're using, what exactly they're going after. VirusTotal metadata is something that people don't think about a lot. If you can't find a screen capture of your page, you should get a lot of information from VirusTotal metadata. This is on the second tab of VirusTotal. A lot of times you can go to a domain, you can see it downloads a text file. You go to that text file on the second page, there's metadata. This metadata tells me that this page, this link, is going to an Outlook sign-in page. I now know what credentials they were looking for. And I didn't have a screen capture. These are things that people don't think about that are very useful when you're trying to analyze what phish is actually in your environment. All right, so you have your phish. You know what you had. You gathered all your IOCs. What do you do with it? Well, you have a report template. It's important that you use something that is repeatable and searchable. We happen to use a version of Confluence, which isn't like the greatest. Now we're up to like 3 years of data, but it's what we have and what we had to use. We made it work for us for right now. And our report is very simple to move externally. So it's just Excel blocks. I can easily copy and paste our report from our repo and put it into an email format and send it out externally. These are things you have to think about when you come up with a report, because it's fine when you're doing it once or twice. When you're doing it 25 times a day, you need to have something that's easily repeatable and easily shareable. I know it's really small. I'm going to go through it in more detail. So here's our example report. You need your intel source. This is important when people go back to your reports. Our entire IR team can go back and search on the past cases using a case number. and come up with the entire report of all the information that they need. So you need to have your source. Or if they look for an IOC and it comes up as like, oh, you know, the financial sector saw this 2 months ago, or the retail sector saw this 2 months ago, like, you need to track where you're getting your data from. This actually looks really good to executives, and I'm going to show you how we transferred this into like some amazing metrics too in about 4 slides. You need to name your pages. You need to figure out a tracking mechanism. We track it by malware name and subject line. And if I had the time, I would get up on my soapbox and tell you why you need to stop using threat actor names and start tracking by malware or behavior. Because I guarantee, unless you currently work for the military-industrial complex, no nation state is looking at you. There might be a few financial people in here that are snickering because they know that they fall into that. But like, Russia's not coming after you. You're not going to have a bear or a panda or whatever TA number they're up to now. You need to track it in a way that's usable. Malware is usable. You need to track it by the behavior, by the threat. And that's how we track it. We track the targeting type. There's a big difference between a campaign that's generic and spear phishing. A generic campaign, and yes, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, 100,000 different emails can still be a spear phishing campaign if you can prove that they're targeting your company or a subsect of your company in a very specific way. Versus just any address they happen to find and your company had 100 in there. Whaling is a term that we use when you are seeing spear phishing against your C-suite. Now this is used poorly a lot of times in the intel community. Some people call like whaling when someone's spoofing your CEO or just generically like saying, hey, can you get in touch with me? But like, you need to define those terms for your company and stick with them. So we have defined set terms like BEC is not BEC unless they actually took over someone's email. If you're spoofing our CEO, then you're a reconnaissance email because you're just looking to establish a foothold with that person and communication with that person. You didn't take over anyone's email. That's not an email compromise. So you need to have these discussions. You need to have the discussion with IR. You need to have the discussion with your malware analyst, with your detection team. You need to make sure that you're all speaking the same language. And then you need to track it that way. We have our senders. So we go back to our Hansatory, and you can see we have a pattern in our senders with all the FedEx senders. Now, if I had just gone with the one, which was the only email I had at the time from that external source, I wouldn't have found 4 other senders and who knows how many emails. And there's 3 subject lines, but you can see a pattern in the subject lines. You start recognizing your patterns. You start knowing how to search faster. You start being able to look over your IR team's shoulder and say, oh, that? Oh, yeah, that's just Hansatory. We'll probably get about 1,500 of them. It should stop around 2. These are all the links. I already looked, like 12 other companies have gotten it. It's not getting past anything. That's something I can say to my team, and they're very appreciative of it. We have our attempts. So an attempt, if you think about it, is one email from one threat actor to one person at your company. That is an attempt. Now, a campaign is however many emails are included in those attempts from that threat actor. You can choose to delineate it however you want. I usually find the ability to either connect it by malware or type or sender. You don't want to start putting like every credential phish that you got in a day in one report because you're not able to divide it out. It's really hard to be like, okay, this one's Bank of America and Capital One, and this one's from OWA. Well, those are different to us. And I would treat them differently, and you should too. And if you keep putting them in one report, it gets really hard for you to share that in a usable format. People are going to start ignoring your intel. And then you're not helping anybody. We track our security appliances. I know how many security appliances are in my environment, and I track exactly which ones eliminated my emails, including LDAP. For those that don't know, LDAP is an appliance that's used to check your email address versus your global address list. If it's not in the proper format or that person doesn't exist in your environment, it's automatically dropped from your environment. We track that. It helps us determine what percentage of the emails sent against us were to bogus addresses, so I know how valid their threat list is. Yeah. That's in there, but like we're really looking at DMARC hasn't come up for the phishing cases that we track with the type of malware and everything. There's really in like some of our spam cases, and we're not really tracking that the same way. Those are for things that are valid phishes. And we can talk, I really want to get to the end of this, so can we talk about it at the end? All right, we can go into it more with DMARC. And successful, to us, a successful phish is anything that was delivered to an end user. It doesn't matter if they clicked on it, if the malware downloaded, if someone had to have a system isolated. You had the ability to have that happen. If it reached my end user, it's successful. Our security appliances failed. Our end user got a phish. We do track clicks and we do track other things too, because it's really important that our, especially for education purposes, we know how many people fell for what types of phishes. We discuss recipients. When it's whaling or when it's spear phishing, I need to tell you why. We have attachments. Sometimes our attachments are dropped, and that's why the email got to end user. We still track that too. Our embedded links and our header. Now, header is where you find that the majority of legal gets really nervous about you sending things externally, because there's a lot of company information, a lot of internal network information associated with the header. What we found is if we broke our header down to just the sender DNS information and our sender IP address, that's what other people need to find things in their environment, and our legal team is perfectly okay with that. So you really need to figure out what is desperately needed by other companies to allow you to share your intelligence. And then we have our email body. You can't really see it because we didn't have an HTML version of it, but they took an actual FedEx delivery email, copy and pasted everything over, all the HTML, all the proper image references, and just changed the hyperlink. The average user is going to fall for this. The average user falls for really silly things. And we just heard talks yesterday and today about not blaming your user. It's hard to educate your user when it looks exactly like the email they're expecting. So you need to have the ability to find these things in your environment and to track it and make sure that your IR team knows what's going on. Okay, so we're going to talk about malware behavior. This one's really long. So Hansator. Hansator is a dropper or a loader, which is a version of malware that's just used to basically get other malware onto your environment. This specific version had a link inside the email. That link changes so often, it's not worth blocking. Your atomic indicator is going to change within 12 hours. What that does is it downloads a Word document, a malicious Word document. That malicious Word document changes about once a week. It's an okay indicator. You're going to have different MD5 hashes. It's not really the best. Well, that malicious Word document has a macro in it. And that macro makes a call out. I believe it's a PowerShell call out to a C2 that actually pulls down malware. Now that C2 is trackable. We have a whole team that spends a lot of time looking at registering addresses, seeing what threat actors are using for their C2, and they were proactively blocking it a day, a week, a year ahead of time before it even comes to our system. That's predictive intelligence. You're able to decide what is going to be in your system a day from tomorrow, a week from tomorrow, and you're able to block it before it even reaches you. You're not going to be able to get to that point if you're not tracking what those C2s are. If you look at that initial link in the body and say, oh, I'm done. You need to make sure you're tracking down that malware. If you don't understand it, find your malware analyst, find a vendor, find whoever does that work for you and ask them to explain it to you so that you can easily communicate it back out. We also track our research and supporting links because like any good Intel analyst, no one can trust each other. I need to see where your research came from. I'm sure you're the greatest researcher in the world and your analysis is trusted by everybody, but I better see all your supporting links so that I can make sure that I agree with it. All right. Collective analysis matters. So we talked about this. We talked about why would you want those reports searchable? Why do you need the historical data? I can do time and day of week of correlation. We went through a period of time in 2016 where Emotet was sent to us Tuesday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. every time, every week, Tuesday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. I walked in, 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Hey guys, it's going to start, ends about 3 p.m., should be about 500. Let me know if you need anything else. This is important information. You need to be able to have that in your security SOC. Easy identification. The majority of my team up here now can identify an email the second it comes in, and that's not because our vendor identifies it correctly. Most of our vendors identify, or automated systems identify as generic malware or some weird body pattern or something. But they can look at it, and they've worked with it, and I've showed them how I identify it, and what my research has shown that they can then do it themselves. You need to have that education going back and forth. You can recognize prevention failures. I work with our security appliance teams. Every week, I bring them a prevention failure. Hey, this email got through. If it's a vendor, I make them go back to the vendor. Hey, we're paying you, and you did not block this email. Tell me why. And don't tell me I need to buy something new. I'm already paying you. You blocked the email that I'm paying you for. And if you have that data, they don't back down. They get really scared. It's really funny. It's a good time.
Scare the vendor.
If it's something that you control, make sure that they understand, like, hey, for, a year, this was blocked by this first appliance, but now we're seeing 2 or 3 getting through. Do we need to reconfigure something? Is there like a new rule that we need? Have they finally got around what we're currently using? This is how you provide actionable intel. Okay, what can you do with the template? You have this template. You have a report. What do you do with it? Internally, statistics for management. If you think those aren't impressive, every month I can track exactly what type of malware was in my environment. The exact amount. When it changes, I can show yearly correlations, monthly correlations, weekly correlations. Do you know what management likes? Pretty graphs. This is an easy way to show your management what the threat landscape looks like. If I can show that in the last month there were 0 ransomware attempts and a new story comes out that finally makes it to CNN about ransomware, well, now my CISO understands that we haven't seen ransomware in 3 months, and we definitely didn't see that one 3 weeks ago because I have the statistics here to prove it. So now we're not refocusing on something that you know isn't in your environment and you know is not a threat. That's saving you time. I mean, how many people here have had to focus on something that you knew was never going to come back and never be in your environment? There's a lot of people that do that on a daily basis, and that's where frustration comes from. All right, you can create relevant phishing education. We have a team that does phishing education. A lot of people have teams that do phishing educations, or you work with vendors. Out of the box, vendor phishing emails for education are not applicable to most environments because they have hundreds or thousands of different clients, and they aggregate that all together. But what works against an industrial, like the delivery vertical, is not going to work against the hospitality vertical. But they kind of mush it all together and just give you options. You need something that works for your environment. So I create all of our phishing. I'm the phishing expert at my company. I create all the phishing that I've seen people click on. This is a nice one. If you ever seen a phish, you've probably seen this. This has been very popular for about 1.5 years. It's a super generic help desk phish. It comes from like tech@helpdesk.01. It's like, hey, we're going to take your email away. Please upgrade. And so many people click on it and input their credentials because they're super, super worried that they're not going to have access to email. Educating your users on what you see every day is how you make your users better. That's how you stop blaming your users, because you're educating them on what you've seen. Without that, you're educating them on whatever vendor told you was the latest thing of 2015. Externally, share your intel. Find trusted partners, sign NDAs, get into the listservs. If you're not sharing your intel, there's no reason for you to be producing it. You need to make sure that your industry is better. Doesn't matter what your industry is. Every industry can be more secure. And you are the people that need to make it more secure. All right. We have a recap. Phishing and CSIRT and detection and security appliances and external sharing and collective analysis and reports over time. And you need to make sure that you set up a program. I didn't want to stand up here and say everybody needs new intel. Intel is broken, but not provide a roadmap for you. You need to have something that you can take back to your company, and I promise you this can translate to any company. And if anyone wants to know how for their specific company, I'm available to talk to them. Are there any questions? We're going to talk about DMARC after this. Anyone else have questions? Yeah, in the back? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's no current out-the-box automation that will provide you good phishing intelligence, not in any timely manner. All of ours is done manually. I know you think that's not possible. I can manually evaluate about 55,000 emails a month. we're working on automation. You kind of have to write it yourself. We're not the best at it, which is why I'm still faster than what we currently have and why it's still manually done. But I'm one person, one FTE. One FTE can provide you a ton of phishing intelligence. Anyone else? Yeah? Oh, our user submission process. So we used to just have like it kind of hanging out there, but a couple years ago we got really good with our education and we make sure our users understand where to submit it to. They submit it to a security inbox, which is monitored, and then run scripts against to make sure that we're not looking at a ton of like spam or legitimate emails that are coming in. We also use a reporter button. That it's like a one click that allows them to send it in to say, hey, I think this is suspicious. Let me click on this button. It sends it to the right place. They don't have to constantly remember which address to send it to, anything like that. Yes, if we were incentivizing them to report. We do incentivize during security months. We do have remedial training and forms of education and additional things that happen if they fail education tests or if someone repeatedly clicks on things like a repeat offender type program. I do believe that this is the only way that you can truly get someone to invest in it is if they know that there is going to be some kind of consequence or something else that they're going to have to do if they fail. We do have months that do have incentives. Those are months where it's especially present or there's like a focus. So October is Security Awareness Month. We definitely do in October. There's a couple of phishing months throughout the year that we focus on and gamify and try to incentivize everything. Yeah.
For attachments, do you look at metadata within the documents, like looking for patterns among the authors?
Yes.
Things like that?
Yes. So we actually have our own reverse engineers on staff, and so a lot of times they'll write up reports for me, and then I can see like, oh, it's been the same author every time, and then we can take it to detection and be like, hey, there's some metadata that I think that we can definitely use for different types of alerting or detection.
So all the analysis, whether they're doing their piece or you're doing the mail piece of this, you're still centralizing all that so that those different pieces can be thrown in.
Yes. All of our phishing analysis is in one location at the end. And I'm the one collecting it because I'm the intel person. So if you're going to find some way to centralize your intel, make sure the intel person is the one-stop shop. That's what they're there for. Yes. Oh, so Confluence is just like online. It's like a SharePoint product. It just happens to be what we use. It's just an Excel template that we happen to store in a searchable format. There was another question here. Yes, we do. So the last one I showed you, here, I can go back a little bit. That's one of our phishing campaign emails that we used a couple years ago. So every week we have a baseline phish that goes out to a select number of our employees, which is a subset. That's what we use to determine how often someone would actually report to us. Then every month there is a specific email that goes out. When people fail, they have a retest 2 weeks later. If they're on the repeat offender program, they get additional education. And then we have phishing education that goes out to specific departments or teams. So if we know that we've had some vendor compromises or like there's been vendor compromises discussed in the Intel forums or anything like that, our vendor management team will get additional training. Or if we know that like SharePoint or Dropbox or any other product that we are currently using has been used a lot in phishing, we give additional training on that. Mm-hmm.
And also, have you hit any compliance and automation issues where you're blocking infections when it grows to such a size that it becomes problematic in the environment? And you compare that down to the health solutions?
We can talk a little more on some of that. He's asked about like our detection environment and how do we basically like go back to our rules that have been established for years and pare them down and stuff like that. And that is a much larger question. One here, and then I think I could take one more. So education is the best way to reduce time to report. So you don't want your user having something sitting in their mailbox for a week and they definitely clicked on it. User education is how you get them to report faster. The external information on phishing is how you have the ability to catch it when your users are still not reporting over the week. So that's information I'm getting externally where I can search for those phishing emails and see that a user had it in their inbox for like 12 hours and whether or not they clicked on it. And then we can take action before they even need to report it into us. So you need to come from both sides of that, not only externally to get that information and you take it on as an onus, but also making sure your users are educated when, like how to recognize it and when to send it in. Okay, last one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we use a vendor for our phishing right now. There's like 3 or 4 of them out there. They're all about the same. Phish Me, Know Before. I think there's a couple other ones. There's now Go Phishing, which is a publicly available Git repo that allows you to set it up internally. And this works especially well for smaller companies that don't have the ability to pay the amounts that a vendor requires. So there's quite a few options out there. But that also, you need something that's going to provide you the statistics, because that's how you determine whether or not what you're doing is working. We use Phish Me. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. If there's more questions, I am around. You obviously can't miss me because I have bright, poofy blue hair. Thank you so much for coming, you guys, and listening.